Welcome to Perspectives with Asama Silva. Today we have a very interesting guest. He literally arrived in the United States about a day and a half ago. And I had the pleasure of meeting him hours after he arrived in the United States. It's a very coincidental story. You know, in our lives, we encounter people for reasons in our lives, in our paths that cross each other. And when you hear their personal stories, you think that there must be a higher power, coincidence, whatever you may believe in, and you were brought together for a reason in terms of the work that you are doing. And today we have Buba Dicko with us. Thank you for joining us today. And you know, let me just set up on how you and I kind of encountered each other. People who know me know that I do a lot of interfaith outreach work, and I have done some presentations at different churches and synagogues and different organizations. And one of the people who had attended one of my lectures had kept me in mind, and she had a student who was coming from overseas and contacted someone because the student needed a place, wanted to know the place of worship, wanted to know a few people from different parts of the community, contacted me and said, would you be able to help? Of course, I read the email, have 1,000 emails like everyone else that come in. There was, I got sick in the middle, there was a religious holiday in the middle of it. But after several attempts of email connections, we were able to connect over email. And I knew nothing about this person. All I knew was that this person needed to get introduced. And coincidentally, when we met each other, within a meeting of an hour and a half, we were able to figure out housing, friendship, place of worship, etc., etc. So, and when I heard this story, I said, you have to come on my show and share your story. So that was a recap of how both of us met. But in terms of Buba, thank you for joining us today. You came straight from Cameroon. I believe it was Thursday that you came, yeah, and arrived in Worcester probably straight from New York as you arrived. So just tell me a little bit about yourself, and what is your first impression of walking into the United States from Cameroon?
Okay, thank you very much, Asima. Thank you for having me on your show. I actually arrived in the US on the 17th. I was for 2 days in Washington and then left Washington and drove into Worcester. So this is my first time coming to Boston in general, and Worcester is quite obviously strange. Like you said in your introductory note, people are always brought together for certain reasons.
Yes.
And I always say in my life, when you find yourself face to face with someone, watch out. It's not by your voluntary efforts, it's some higher power pulling you together. And there's always a purpose for that coming together. And until you are able to maximize your coming together, make maximum use of it, you might not have succeeded for the purpose for which you were brought together. So I want to first of all thank you. Thank you immensely for having me. Yeah. So America, this is my second time coming to America. Yeah, a lot of things are strange, like you rightly said, but I think I'm in a family out of home, far out of home.
I'm glad you had a great experience coming here in the first few days, and you're settling into Clark University. And what are you majoring in?
So I'm a graduate student at Clark University. I'm majoring in international development and social change with particular interest in monitoring and evaluation. I don't just want to be involved in monitoring and evaluation, but I want to be a designer of the tools for monitoring and evaluation that program implementers will want to use to track and measure the impacts they're making in their activities, in their programs or projects. Yeah.
So how did you get interested in this program, and what is bringing you to Clark University? What's the backstory?
Okay, so I'm a teacher by profession. I am a trained teacher. I've taught English language and literature for 8 years back in Cameroon. And initially, when I was in primary school, I had this urge in me. I felt like I had I had a voice in me, and I needed an audience. And then at that stage, my likely career was what I was interested in doing was to become a journalist, because I thought being a journalist would give me an opportunity for a wide-scale audience. But along the lines, when I went to university, I realized, and I like telling this story a lot, I realized that if I became a journalist, there are two likely options. Either I would go to jail easily, or I would be killed easily, because I would not be those type of journalists who will use my pen or my mouth to tell the story the way some other person wants it, at the expense of the truth. And so because the media
landscape... So I just want to take a second there. You're coming from a country where, becoming a journalist and your desire to, tell the truth to everybody, is risking your life or for your freedom. And I just wanted to take a moment for that, because as an American, that concept is foreign. We believe the journalists, or at least believe that the reason why people go into journalism is to tell the truth, and it's an honorable profession, and it's a profession that is protected under the freedom of speech. But it's interesting you're saying that in your country that you had two outcomes if you wanted this career.
Of course, yes. Yeah, we know freedom of the press is a standard every country is trying to attain. But the reality on the ground is somehow different. Like, there are a lot of countries where a lot of journalists are undergoing persecution. So the political class will always want to tilt the story in their favor, and not every journalist will want to tell the story the way they want it, at the expense of the truth. Yeah. So gradually, I discovered that being a journalist was risky for someone like me. So I decided to look for an alternative career that would still give me an audience and a possibility to still air that message in me. And so that's how I started thinking of teaching. And I took up teaching for two principal reasons. First, it provides me the audience, even though at a very tender age. Mm-hmm. But secondly, most importantly, it provides me an opportunity to exercise my career without the temptation of corruption. So as a teacher, I'm not sitting in any office for anyone to come around with a tendency to corrupt me with an envelope or anything like that. So that's how I went into teaching. And 8 years down the lane, I am feeling like gradually growing larger than an ordinary classroom setting. I want to engage with communities, with people who can take concrete action in changing their lives, instead of just standing in front of kids and teaching, So that's how I started developing an interest in the civil society space, engaging with communities, with people, talking about concrete steps to change their lives. So that's how I went into the civil society. Okay. And my being in Clark University has some resonance with this interest in the civil society. So I want to develop. I've been involved in implementation of programs a lot, but across the board, the observation I've made is a lot of people, a lot of organizations do implement programs, but most people and organizations have difficulties tracking in a measurable way the impact they're making in those programs. And that's why I'm coming to Clark to sharpen my skills, to be able to gain the knowledge that is required not only to measure programs, but to be someone who can design the measuring tools in monitoring and evaluation.
So can you share with us some stories or which programs you were involved in before you came here to refine your skills at Clark? Yeah.
Okay. So I hate talking about myself a lot, but this question will always come up.
Yes.
when I talk with people. So generally, why I hate talking about myself, I'm someone who believes a lot in doing rather than talking.
Right.
Yes. So if there is...
But we need to hear your story so that we can understand it and also motivate others who might be on the same path.
And that's what I'm trying to tell. Yeah. So generally, I'm someone who loves doing things rather than saying things, because in most of my activities, I'm always at the forefront. I always want to show by example instead of just commanding or telling people this is what you have to do. So there is a big difference between telling and showing. Mm-hmm. So I've done a lot of things. But before I left for Clark University, two major things I was involved in was a project in women empowerment and my role as a Peace Corps trainer in Cameroon. So let me talk first of all about my work with the Women Empowerment Project.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked as a project coordinator for an organization called A2 Empowerment. This is an organization founded by returned Peace Corps volunteers who served in Cameroon and saw the need to support girls' education in Cameroon. So when they returned to America, they founded the organization called A2 Empowerment in 2007. And then since then, they've been involved in awarding scholarship to girl students. Since 2007, they have awarded almost 1,700 scholarships to Cameroonian girls.
Oh, wow.
Across 8 regions in Cameroon. So I have been a mentor on the program before becoming the project coordinator. And just last academic year in Cameroon, the year just ended, we had 483 girls on the program. So what we do is not just pay school fees for these girls and send them to school. We do follow them up on the program.
Okay.
We do have monthly workshops with the girls. So we have mentors in each of the schools where we have students who are being sponsored on the program. So these mentors have a task, have a curriculum that they implement with these girls on a monthly basis, and they report back. And the main goal is to sharpen the skills of these girls, to brighten them up, to prepare them for real life after school. And many of those girls who pass through the program have come back to reinvest their skills on the program as alumni,
Mm-hmm.
and offering mentorship to other girls. And that is how we want the snowball effect to continue to
Right.
generate and then
What
widen
age
its scale.
does it start at?
So there is no specific age limit. It focuses mainly on need.
Okay.
Yeah, so basically students who wouldn't have the opportunity to go to school without that support are those type of girls that we target.
So the scholarships are based on need or are also based on performance?
Yeah, so it's both. Initially it's based on need, but by the end of the first year, the possibility for renewal of the scholarship is based on performance.
Okay.
Yeah,
And how many, this year you said about 480,
83.
83 students.
Yeah.
Overall, how many students have passed through this program?
Overall, since 2007,
Mm-hmm.
almost 1,700.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you see yourself sharpening your skills at Clark about, figuring out how impact you have in terms of this project and evaluating that impact and bringing it back to this particular organization?
Yeah, of course. I think after my studies in Clark, my usefulness is going to spread across a lot of things because I do quite a lot of things, bunch of things, not only with girls empowerment. Like I said, I was going to talk about my work with Peace Corps Cameroon.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's another thing I've been doing for 2 years. But before being a Peace Corps trainer, I have been working with Peace Corps Cameroon for a number of years, like a community counterpart who help Peace Corps volunteers integrate in the communities where they are sent, and then be like a guide, And this has also helped me to become what I am today,
Mm-hmm.
because the contact with Peace Corps volunteers has left indelible marks in my memory and has grown my skills in a lot of ways.
So it seems like you were very busy in Cameroon doing these different works and good work. What made you choose Clark? I mean, there's many other universities, many other choices. How did life bring you to Worcester, Massachusetts?
Very interesting, very interesting. What made me choose Clark? So the motto of Clark is challenging convention, changing the world. And when I saw this motto, it sparked up a lot of thought in me. It resonated in a very special way in me. Convention, challenging convention, and then changing the world. the world will always change, whether we like it or not. But we should try to make conscious efforts to be partners in changing the world in our own favor. Otherwise, it will change.
Right.
Sometimes in our favor, sometimes not in our favor. So that conscious attempt by us to intervene in the way the world changes is very interesting. It's very important, and I think that's where my interest for Clark University comes in. Challenging convention, because a lot of things sometimes convention is very important. When you look at communities, you look at societies, a lot of things sometimes, even at the expense of growth, are done just because convention one is to be done this way or that way, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, so we should be confident enough, we should be strong enough to face those challenges posed by convention on us in order to change the world voluntarily. Otherwise, we will watch things happen helplessly, and sometimes they happen in our favor and sometimes in our disfavor.
So can you give us a picture of what Cameroon is like? How was your life? How is it different than what I would expect a child growing in America? Unfortunately, I'm not very familiar with the lifestyle or what I would expect a child's life would be growing up in Cameroon. If you could give us a picture of what your life was like.
Okay, so I grew up in a typical rural area in the northwest region of Cameroon, in a locality called Womb, which is also famous for one reason. So if you've read history, in 1986, a crater lake in Cameroon called Lake Nyos exploded and killed almost 2,000 people and thousands of animals. So that's what makes Womb a bit famous to a lot of people.
Okay.
So I grew up in Womb, particularly in a place called Opa. And Opa is also famous because survivors of this Lake Nyos disaster were resettled in Opa. So I grew up in a typical rural environment, rural area. And I come from the Fulani Mbororo community, which is a pastoral community. I grew up with cattle, I grazed cattle. And so this is a community that has some peculiarities also, because for a long time they sat on the fence and refused sending their children to school. So the few of us who had the opportunity to go to school, it was a huge challenge for us to change the image, that conception that the community had, that anti-secular education conception that the community had, mm-hmm. in order to embrace education. And so when I finished school, as a teacher, I asked to be sent back to that community because I knew I would be more useful there.
What motivated you? If it wasn't a popular thing to do in terms of getting an education, what motivated you?
I think it all resonates with what I just said about the motto of Clark.
Okay.
I believe in challenging conventions. I believe in changing the world, right?
Right.
So if these people have sat on the fence for a long time, preventing their kids from going to school, just because they have some conceptions in their minds that the Western education is a white man's affair, and that they had a distrust for what their children will become in the future after going to school. So it was my duty as someone who has gone to school to present the other, to flip the coin and present the other side.
What was your experience going back then to your community? What was your experience when you went back?
It was not an easy task, but luckily enough, before the year of my graduation from school, a lot of sensitization had taken place within the communities, and a lot of people had already understood the importance of sending their children to school.
Okay.
So it wasn't easy, but at least I had some support. Mm-hmm. I can't say I did it myself. In fact, the environment was enabling because of the work of other partners, other civil society organizations.
That's great.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming your parents are very proud of you and your family's very proud of you. But how does it feel now to be so far away from all of them?
Yeah. So when I was taking the decision to leave for Clark University, I I kept asking myself one important question. Because I have a family and I have a regular job, so why was I going out? Was I ungrateful for what I had already? Or what was the reason for going out? So, but the only way I convinced myself was to accept deep in my mind that I was not coming to Clark or going out there, leaving my family for myself. I was going out there for my people, for my community. I need to do a lot of things. I need to change the lives of people, but I cannot do much with the little I have and with the little skills that I have. I need to develop these skills to be able to act on a wider scale. Mm-hmm. So that is the reason why I'm here. And it's not easy leaving home, with my kids and the family, especially at a time when the country is boiling with a conflict for over 3 years. It's not easy to leave one's family behind, but because I know I'm involved or engaged in a noble adventure that of wanting to put smiles on the faces of people, then I accept it and I want to do it.
I hope you definitely find that satisfaction in the goal that you're looking for. One thing you mentioned is you grew up with cattle on farm. The reason why I'm going to ask this question is you have experience being a teacher in education, and there is this ongoing discussion in the educational field with teachers and educators about talking about getting children back on connection with the land, connection with farming, connection with animals, because the Western culture and schooling has kind of taken away the kids from that connection with farming and really the skills of the basic skills that most other people may have grown with in the other countries. Do you see that maybe that helped you in any way when you grew up, really connected with the land, with farming, with animals, with cattle? Do you feel that enhanced your learning abilities in some way? This is a conversation that people in the West, have, and they struggle with this whole idea of giving kids more time to be with nature and to understand and experience nature, not just with the textbook in a classroom.
Yeah, perfectly well, because like I've always said throughout my studies to my professors and my lecturers, don't tell me a lot of theories. Show me how to do things. Because the local man down there in the street who does the practical work will not understand all those theories. He needs to understand how to do things practically to change his life. So it's not the big book, as we used to call it sometimes, that matters, but how you are able to translate what you have learned into doable chunks of information that you pass on to people, and they are able to do it and make an impact on their lives. So right. I think by growing up in that local setting still gives me the opportunity, has given me and still continue to resonate in my mind the need for information to be brought down to the level of whosoever the actor is. Mm-hmm. Yes, because a lot of research is being done for policymakers to implement programs, but sometimes the tendency is a lot is being said about the people behind their backs, and they don't even know. Sometimes all they see are people who come around collecting data in the form of questionnaires about their lives, but at the end of the day, how do these chunks of research narrow down or trigger down into policies that can change people's life? I think that's something that I find like a problem in a lot of areas, and I've always spoken about it. It's not a big book that matters, but we need practical actions, information that can change people's lives.
Be realistic, just not theory, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
We only have a few minutes left, but I'm sure we could talk for hours with some stories that you have, but can you pick one story that you can share with us and tell us why you would pick that story to share with us?
Okay, so one thing that I always look back with a lot of interest, with satisfaction in my life, is my ability to circumvent a cultural or a traditional convention of early marriage in my community and work through the difficulty to succeed in my education. So initially, in my community, girls will be sent to marriage as early as 12 years.
Okay.
And usually, it's not even by consent, right? And once a boy is married, they just leave school and take off community life.
Right.
So I saw that coming to me because it's a tradition. And I realized early enough that standing against that tradition will only antagonize me with this community and does not allow me the opportunity to talk to this community, to effect any change in this community. So I decided to start looking for alternative ways of surviving with this phenomenon and at the same time succeed. And so when the time came for me to get married, I got married, but I forced myself through education and succeeded. And today, hundreds of young men are going to school while married. And I think I'm one of those who were the first to do something like that. I thank God for that. And I'm so happy that now early marriage, though it's there, it's not more preventing young men from going to school.
Right.
Yeah.
So basically you chose your battles. You knew that you couldn't change the entire convention, but you are starting to change some of it.
Exactly.
Okay. We only have a minute or so left of this show, but I hope you enjoyed, and I know like Buba could share tons of those inspiring stories. But what I think I learned from this particular show is that sometimes there's paths in our lives, people that we meet, and the choices we make are destined for us. And the choices we make, especially the ones that we dedicate ourselves to do the greater good, are the most satisfying and the most productive. And I hope, I wish Buba the best of luck at Clark, and I hope he achieves all the benefit of the education that he's looking for and can bring it back to his community. I also would like to interview you again after you do get your education to see what your experience has been and how you will bring it back to your community. So thank you for watching and joining Perspectives with me. So join us again with Perspectives with Asama Silva.